On today's BizNews Briefing, Cyril hits back hard at the US over BRICS, Dawie Roodt on SA's dismal economic growth outlook, the DA tears into the Public Investment Corporation, and Canada unveils groundbreaking energy plans. It's Thursday, the 10th of July. This is your BizNews Briefing. I'm Bronwyn Nielsen. In today's top stories, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has stepped into an escalating spat with Donald Trump. That's over the US president's trade threats targeting the BRICS group. Ramaphosa was speaking in Rio de Janeiro as he left the two-day BRICS summit. Cyril is the first BRICS leader to openly criticize Trump for his warning to BRICS members of potential penalties for adopting policies he says are anti-American.
There is nothing negative in the declaration, and there is everything about advancing the interests of various countries in the world, if not all, and the interests of people in the world, so that we leave no one behind. So it is really disappointing that when there is such a very positive collective manifestation such as BRICS, there should be others who see it in negative light and want to punish those who participate in this. It cannot be and should not be. We should be respecting the sovereignty of countries. We should be respecting that we're all equal, that all we should be focusing on is enhancing the prosperity of humanity in all countries. It cannot be that might should now be right, where in the end those who are more powerful are the ones who seek to have vengeance against those who are seeking to do good in the world.
Meanwhile, political economy analyst Theo Venter from Northwest University Business School, speaking to Linda van Tilburg on National Security News, says South Africa shouldn't see the tariffs as a battle with America. This is just a change in the world order.
We are trading with India. India has got a 51% tariff on all agricultural goods that go from South Africa to India. But we serve with India in BRICS. There are tariffs on our goods going to China. We serve in BRICS with China. So it's a world in which one has to take a very, very clear view and have to look at things in a balanced way. The other view that you'll get in South Africa is that the Americans are actually taking us on politically. I don't think they're taking us on politically. I think this is hard-nosed trade, where you're trading with a very big player, the largest economy in the world, and there is no way that you can trade on even keel with such a big economy. It's a different story between Britain and America. There, I think there's a historical tie, and there are other things that came to mind in the negotiations. But even if you look at Vietnam, and Vietnam got two tariffs, a 20% tariff if it's manufactured in Vietnam, a 40% tariff if things are going from China to Vietnam, from Vietnam to America, because the Americans know that's what the Vietnamese are doing, and the Chinese know that the Americans know that's what they are doing. So I think we are up to a very hard-nosed trading regime that is different for everybody. There's nobody in the world at the moment that can escape this. I think what we have seen now with the letters going out, and more letters are going out, we are looking at a global trade reset.
The efficient group's Dawie Roodt says the tariffs are yet another obstacle to South Africa's already dismal economic growth rate.
The South African economy is hardly growing. My estimates for economic growth this year is that economic growth is unlikely to get to 1%. In fact, I expect something like 0.7, 0.8% economic growth. That in an environment where the population is growing by about 1.3% simply means that on a per capita basis, we're going to get poorer once again, like we've seen so many years before. And the main reason for that has to do with the wrong macroeconomic policies by the ANC government, but also because the ANC government is positioning ourselves, I believe, incorrectly internationally. We should try to be as neutral as possible. Unfortunately, due to our positioning politically internationally and also because of certain policies that we follow in South Africa, the chances that we could be hit by 40% tariffs if we want to export to the United States certainly increased quite a lot. In fact, we don't really know what those tariffs are going to be. Is it going to be 40%? Will there be an additional 10% because we're part of BRICS? Will certain items be excluded from the tariffs? Like, for example, certain basic minerals like platinum, for example. So we don't know, but I think chances are quite good that we will see some additional tariffs. It's even possible that we could see some sanctions against certain individuals in South Africa. But what's the likely impact on that on the South African economy? And of course, depending on the extent of the tariffs, I think the impact is not going to be that large. My expectations is that the impact could be, say, 0.2, 0.3, maybe 0.4% less in terms of economic growth. So we pay a price of 0.3, 0.4% reduction in economic growth because of these tariffs. That is the sort of ballpark scenario. But because we don't know what the tariffs are going to be, calculating these sort of impacts is basically impossible. The main point, however, is that the South African economy is hardly growing. And with an economy that is hardly growing, any additional obstacle is going to be bad for the economy.
Meanwhile, there's another debate raging on whether South Africa is portraying the correct unemployment rate, as it doesn't take into account the thriving informal economy. Let's dip into Alex's conversation with Capitec CEO Gerrie Fourie.
You're now being accused as the capitalist who supports the National Democratic Revolution, as the supporter of socialist ideals, that South Africa is actually doing well. It's all the data that we're seeing from the unemployment side is not right, because Capitec's figures show, and of course they're real world figures, yours, show that things aren't that bad. So how do you react to that, which I'm sure you've been challenged with people in your circle on this issue?
Yeah, I think, Alec, unfortunately everyone stuck to the 10% comment I made. And I know Gigi and myself had many conversations, and I really believe our unemployment rate is not 32%, but it's much closer to 10. But the real point I've made was that we need to understand the informal sector better in South Africa. And if we want to unlock and grow South Africa, I believe that is where the growth is going to be. Because if you look at employment, the big companies is not employing, government is not employing, it's the entrepreneurs that's employing. So the point I'm bringing across is we don't understand the informal sector. And we need to understand that we can support it with policies, infrastructure, investments, etc., to grow it, because then I believe we're going to unlock the potential in South Africa. But unfortunately, a big portion of South Africa don't understand the informal market. And that somewhere everyone got into the 10% and the inequality, etc. But the big point is actually, let's understand that market and really develop policies for it and grow it. It's for me interesting being in Mexico. As you know, we've got operations there. 55% of their employment is coming from the informal market. And the point is, they understand the informal market. They're supporting it. They're giving them a roof over their shop. They're giving them a place where they can close their stock, etc. And I think that's what we need to focus on.
Gerrie, the quantifiable numbers, can you help us with that, given that you do have access to information that nobody else in South Africa has, being such a huge bank with so many clients and many of them in the informal sector?
Alex, it's actually quite an interesting one, because it's a difficult one, because if I look at our banking clients, we've got 9 million banking clients. Of them, 3 million has got it's not coming from an organization, so it's not a payroll. It's coming from multiple income streams. And if I look at all our research that our branches has done, maybe just that people understand, we've got 400 branches in these informal economies, or what we call emerging. So we understand what's happening. Each one of those people has got 3-4 people working for themselves. So if you just do a simple sum and you say 3 million times 3, it gives you 9 million people that's dependent on it. And I think it's very close to Gigi's numbers of between 9 and 12 million that is active. If you look at Finscope, which is an international company that is doing research, they're estimating that economy to be around about 10 and 12 million. But we see a tremendous amount of inflows. I think what makes it challenging is there's a very strong cash economy. And unfortunately, if you're sitting with a cash economy, you haven't got data. But what we can see from our side is plus minus about 9 million people.
At Sun Exchange, we make going solar simple, profitable, and completely risk-free. Join over 100 satisfied South African customers already enjoying the benefits of risk-free solar. Start saving today. Visit sunexchange.com and join the solar revolution.
Right now, you can get the cheapest Forex rate around, right here, on Shift. Pay less for your dollars, pounds, and euros here, and get to shop more here, and do more here, and enjoy more ooh la la here. Shift also lets you trade and transfer currencies, and buy shares in the world's best companies. It all happens right here on Shift. You won't find a cheaper Forex rate anywhere else, no matter where you bank. Download the Shift app today.
Back in Parliament, the DA is not holding back on its view of the Public Investment Corporation that it alleges is riddled with corruption. Here's Andrew Bateman, DA spokesperson on appropriations.
The PIC is so large that there's no pothole large enough to hide it. Not even in the failing ANC, EFF, PA governed Metro of Johannesburg. In fact, there's no sinkhole that's large enough to hide it. Despite the excellent work of the Party Commission, people are starting to realize that the PIC has still not been fixed. It's becoming increasingly clear from examples such as Daybreak Foods that the nearly 1,000 pages of the Party Commission report have not sufficiently changed the culture of the organization. According to media reports, a number of directors of Daybreak who were appointed by the PIC since the Party Commission focused more on looting than on building the company. Eventually, Daybreak collapsed under the weight of this mismanagement, along with thousands of jobs. We are yet to see evidence of negligent and corrupt directors being held properly to account. Madam Speaker, the question is this, Madam House Chair. If we cannot rely on the PIC to be a responsible shareholder, to appoint competent, honest, capable boards, and to hold directors to account for what was once an investment of over 1 billion rands, how can we trust the PIC with over 3 trillion rands of assets under management? As the DA, we are deeply concerned that the nightmare of Daybreak Foods is not the exception at the PIC, but the rule. Or perhaps we should say the absence of rules, because there's been scant accountability when those supposed rules have been violated. We welcome the initiatives of the Minister to look into this.
The Canadian government and the oil and gas industry are navigating significant changes in 2025, driven by a mix of economic, environmental, and geopolitical pressures. Let's take a listen.
Big news around the world this morning is that Canada has announced it wants to be the world's energy superpower, throwing off its recent woke past, and it is now going to aggressively develop its oil and gas resources. It'll bring new focus onto what's happening here in South Africa, where destructive energy policies have prevented the exploration of massive oil and gas resources that would bring billions of dollars in investment to the country, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs, and transform the national tax situation. The DA spokesman on mining, James Lorimer MP, has described this oil and gas as a bonanza on the scale of the famous diamond and gold discoveries that transformed the South African economy for 2 centuries. Well, reason for missing out, ruinous legislation justified by the ANC as promoting black economic empowerment. But in effect, it's designed to feed the greed of the political elite. The greed here is extreme. 50% of any project has to be given away before a license will be granted. Well, the multinationals have voted with their feet, including Total, which had already spent hundreds of millions of dollars exploring off the southern Cape Coast. It found a highly attractive potential find there, and it abandoned it because of government policies. The cost here is obvious when you consider what is happening off the Orange River mouth on the Namibian border. Namibia is widely described as the next great oil and gas district of the world, with much of the focus of the exploration there by excited multinationals in the Orange River Basin. To the immediate south of this frenzy, where identical conditions exist, well, quite nothing. Just like Elon Musk, oil and gas majors refuse to line the pockets of the political elites in South Africa, we the people miss out on a national game changer while the Namibians are poised for huge opportunities. Not for the first time, our traditional economic competitors in Canada and Australia are laughing at South African folly. Here's the Canadian story from this morning's FT.
Canada wants to make some major changes to its oil and gas industry.
Today, I'm announcing a comprehensive new approach to make Canada the world's leading energy superpower.
That was Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. Up to now, almost all of the country's liquefied natural gas, or LNG, has been exported south to the U.S. But Canada is firing up a series of LNG terminals along its west coast. It wants to ramp up LNG exports overseas. And Canada actually started shipping to Asia earlier this month. I'm joined now by the FT's Canada correspondent, Ilya Gridnev. As I said, we just heard from Prime Minister Mark Carney touting the new direction of Canada's energy industry. Tell us a little bit about the change in strategy here.
Well, Mark Carney came to power in April, so it's a new government and it's a new direction. He came to power pretty much on the back of the threats made by US President Donald Trump, threats to annex Canada, the tariffs, all these measures that sort of woke Canada up, and Canada needed to sort of diversify its economy and pivot away from over-reliance on the US. So at the present, 90% of its oil goes to the US, and it never really had exploited its LNG reserves. Now, a lot of that comes back from the previous Liberal government under former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. There were numerous reasons why they were reluctant to exploit natural gas, in particular environmental policy, regulations. They also said there wasn't a business case for it when the gas price was where it was at. And that has just changed under the new Prime Minister and due to the hostilities from President Trump.
So, Ilya, as far as I understand it, it's not just that, Canada decided that it wanted to pick up and become this energy superpower. There are some natural advantages that it has going for it, right?
I mean, the reality is Canada has huge reserves. They have oil, natural gas, coal, they have uranium. There is an abundance of hydropower, natural resources, and renewables, solar and wind. That really makes Canada already an energy superpower, some would say. But I think where the shift has been is about exploiting and ramping up the potential there. I mean, while there is rhetoric for Canada to become an energy superpower, the challenge has been is the infrastructure. Just there hasn't been any push or political will to build more pipelines. And that's no simple task. That requires political consensus. That requires consultation with First Nations. It requires environmental regulations. The idea of building more pipelines was unthinkable, maybe a year ago. But in the current climate with the Trump administration and the tariffs and the economic uncertainty, Canadians are sort of shifting their views and are becoming much more pragmatic about their role and their place in the world.
That was Ilya Gridnev in Toronto.
JP Morgan's chief US economist, Michael Feroli, says that the Federal Reserve won't cut rates until December amid the uncertainty from tariffs. Here are our Bloomberg colleagues.
Patience in the near term and the long term needed?
Yes, I'm not sure about the long term. As you mentioned, there was a lot of divide on the FOMC today, most of it relating to, or I should say at the last meeting, most of it relating to tariffs and how that's going to pass through to inflation and how soon and how persistent. So I think that's going to really determine the evolution of policy between September and next year. I think July is off the table after last Friday, but it's really that divide that I think is going to determine and the realization of the inflation readings over the remainder of the summer. That's really going to play out.
So I believe December is your call for
Correct.
when we're going to get a cut. But come May, when there is someone new, do you think it's just down, and away, or do you think that's more nuanced as well?
I think that is more nuanced. Look, the chair normally has the committee on his side, but normally the chair leads from the center. So I think a new chair that comes in and pushes an agenda that is at odds with what the economic data would dictate is going to find himself with 11 people opposing that. So I think it's a little more nuanced than just coming in and pushing hard against a committee that may be united in opposition, particularly if it's not a close call.
Well, that's what I'm curious about. I mean, we've heard a lot of anecdotal evidence from former Fed members about that process. People would talk about how Greenspan would get on the phone with every single person individually, talk to them before the meeting. Apparently Yellen, Bernanke, and even Powell apparently did do the same thing. But there is now some concern that as you start to get more of an ideological divide on some of these issues, that's going to make the challenge much harder for whoever the next Fed chair is.
So I don't sense there's that much ideological divide in the current FOMC, right? And you have had two governors who recently came out quite a bit more dovish than anticipated, and some feel like that's posturing for potentially getting the job.
Right.
But I think when you look at the presidents of the 12 regional reserve banks, there's really no ideology there. I think it's just how they read the data and how they weigh the evidence on the outlook.
That brings us to the end of this BizNews briefing. We'll be back on Monday with more context on both the global and local front. Thanks as always for joining us.